got involved politically in America over the schooling issue. You're in Virginia, and there was a bit of a parents' rebellion in that state. And I think it's one of the reasons why that state now has a Republican governor, because the battleground was the classroom. Could you tell us just for a minute about that? Why did you get involved, and what did you learn from the great battle over schools in Virginia?
Yes, I was involved because I could not sit aside no longer. It was 2020 when I finally said, enough is enough. This is cultural revolution that I experienced when I was a schoolgirl in China. So I decided to get involved. So I joined the local Loudon County Republic Committee, and then Republican Women's Club. And that's when I got started, and we went to school board, and where I delivered a 1-minute speech. I went viral. That's how I started.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about the lockdowns, and we had terrible lockdowns here in Canada, and schools were shut down for so long, I think that parents saw what was going on in the classroom because the computer was on by Zoom. And so a lot of parents who really weren't that familiar with what was going on from 9 to 3:30 every day at school suddenly saw, oh my gosh, is this what you learn all the time? Was that what happened to you, or did you get involved in another way? Because I think a lot of people were startled to see what was actually being taught in class. What was your story?
And that's really what started all of us, the parents. And there is a video, and it's a Zoom class video of a teacher asking a young Black student, and presented a photo of a Black girl and a white girl, asked him to describe the photo, and he said, well, 2 girls. And then the teacher pushed him. And finally, the teacher said, you're not being honest. It's a Black girl and a white girl. And this student was so smart. He recorded it and then and gave it to the Republican Women's Club leader. And then it went viral. And it is an example of how teachers push critical race theory to their students.
That's very interesting. Good for him for holding the line. Now, I didn't know that about your past, but that's a very exciting way to get, and very meaningful way to get involved in public life. I mean, there's nothing more important than our kids and our schools. But one of the things I find fascinating is that you are drawing comparisons between the Cultural Revolution in China and the extreme revisionism. We were talking about this on the show the other day, the 4 olds that were banned: old ideas, old culture, old customs, old habits. They would smash anything old. Chinese history, they would smash the church. They would smash any other source of authority. I follow you on Twitter, and I find it fascinating to see you juxtapose that ideological cult, that Maoist cult, with what's going on in North America today. Can you talk a little bit about that? First of all, let me ask you, did you experience that Cultural Revolution when you were a young person in China? Maybe you can start off by telling us a bit about that and then the comparison.
Yes. I absolutely experienced the entire Cultural Revolution. When it started, I was in my second semester of my first grade. And my entire school years was in the Cultural Revolution. And after that, after I graduated from high school, and Mao sent all of us, the urban youth, to the countryside to continue our education. It's called re-education by the peasants. So I worked in the fields for 3 years before Mao died. After that, I was able to go to college. So I absolutely had my youth taken, my childhood and my youth taken away by Mao. Well, so I saw everything.
Let's start with the younger grades. So I presume that before the Cultural Revolution, you would have learned the same things that kids, I suppose, learn elsewhere, how to read and write and Chinese history and I suppose normal things that a kid in grade 1 in China would do. What were you taught once the Cultural Revolution came in, were you still taught spelling, or I guess it's not spelling, to draw the Chinese characters? Were you still taught calligraphy and history, or was it all politics? What did you learn in grade 1, 2, 3 when you were a kid in China?
It is important to understand that before the Cultural Revolution, there were many, many cultural revolutions ever since 1949, when the Communist Party took over China. The school turned into an indoctrination mill, but it was still relatively reasonable. So I remember my first semester in school, it was just normal with learning, even though there's a lot of socialist and communist narratives, but still kind of normal math, reading, and writing. And I remember some just harmless, beautiful lines from my Chinese textbook, such as the little creek the water was running in the little creek, hua la la, hua la la, just description of the sound. And after the Cultural Revolution, that's too bourgeois. That is not political enough. So everything was abandoned. All textbooks were destroyed. And so for about a year or so, we have no textbooks. Only thing we had is Mao's Little Red Book. That's all we did. In the class, we read it, we recited, we even sang songs because all those quotation was set into music. And that's all we did. And reading it, and then we have a mini class struggle session. I don't know if people realize what it is. A struggle session is basically the little kids sit together and we will do criticism and self-criticism according to what we learned from Mao's Little Red Book. And we'd say something like, according to Mao's instruction, I did not do well this way, that way, and other kids said, yes, you're right. You did not do this way right and that way right. So that's kind of like a mini struggle session. But in reality, the adult world, that was brutal. That was Red Guards getting those people on stage, condemn them, and sometimes torture, sometimes just kill them right on the spot.
Oh, my God. Now, of course, when you're a very young child, I suppose the criticism of you and the self-criticism, it would most likely be trivial things. I don't know, maybe they asked you about the wealth of your family or something. Maybe you were being criticized for that. But I am somewhat familiar with the struggle sessions that were for adults and where people had to self-denounce and wear signs shaming themselves in dunce hats. I saw the book, and I have it, and I've done a show on it before called Red Color News Soldier, by a Chinese communist soldier who was an official photographer, and he took thousands of pictures in Heilongjiang of the Cultural Revolution, and just shocking images. They would have show trials, and if you didn't denounce yourself, I remember there was this one haunting picture of they stuffed a glove in one guy's mouth because he wanted to protest his innocence. They wanted to shut him up at his own trial. And did you see any of that kind of a thing?
I just want to add to what you said. There was another picture of Red Guards put the hay, the grass, the hay in someone's mouth while denouncing this guy. No, I've seen that. I've seen different things. I've seen the struggle session for the governor of my province. So because he was denounced. Even a powerful governor
would tumble before the Red Guards, and the Red Guards were the youth wing, right?
Yeah. That is really what the Cultural Revolution is about. It's Mao using the youth, the Red Guard, to take down his political enemies, which is pretty much the entire communist bureaucracy.
Wow. So no one was immune. In fact, the more powerful you were, the more at risk you were because you were a political rival. And so instead of having other political rivals in their 30, 40, 50, 60s or 70s, he would go to the youth because they would just recite these things by rote. It really would be a cult like, there would be trances, there would be things they would just repeat. So it was sort of flipping the world on its head, wasn't it? The children were the dictators in the Red Guard. Is that an accurate thing to say?
That's exactly what happened then, and that's exactly what's happening here in America and in Canada. They use the young people.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.